Falcons won this game 34-7 in Michael Penix's first game here as a starter since making the switch from Kirk Cousins over to him. For Atlanta's side of things, their top graded player was offensive tackle Jake Matthews, a 91.7, safety Jesse Bates, a 90.3, linebacker Caden Ellis, a 90.2. Whew! It's not often you get 3 90s on one team in one game. That's pretty impressive. Guard Chris Lindstrom with an 84.6. Guard Matthew Bergeron, an 81.4. As you can notice, there's a little bit of a theme here, and that's the Falcons offensive line kicked some serious ass in this game. Quarterback Michael Penix in his first start, a 75.4 overall grade. On New York's side of things, rookie wide receiver Malik Neighbors has the top grade at a 75.6. Linebacker Ty Summers with an equal 75.6 himself. Edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau a 68.2. Cornerback Deontay Banks a 67.3. Guard Jake Kubas with a 67.2. And then Drew Lock in this one, not pretty. 38.6 overall grade here for Drew Lock. Your stat that told the story here, Dalton. What do we got?
So no matter what the result of this game was, we were going to come out of it talking about Michael Penix Jr. in his first start. So that's what I'm going to do. Look, I think if you just looked at the box score and went, okay, 18-27, 200 yards, the interception, you would just go, okay, he was whatever. They carried him to a win. I don't think that's the case at all. A 77.7 passing grade. I thought he was in command. I thought he had a really good knowledge of the offense. I think his eyes, he uses his eyes as a weapon. You can see multiple times looking off defenders, freezing defenders during his drop, and then getting back where he needs to be. You saw him get to his second read on a couple of play action looks. I think the fact that he is more mobile than Kirk Cousins, maybe that doesn't show up in rushing yards, but you could tell clearly that Zach Robinson was more comfortable calling the bootleg game off of the outside zone that they run, right? So I think it was just the foundations of their offense with Penix at quarterback looked a lot better. And I think one of the big things in this game that Penix did was really effective over the middle of the field. 8 for 8 with 99 yards and a 90 passing grade over the middle of the field. It's somewhere that, look, Cousins was in the middle of the road grading-wise over the middle, but he came into this week leading the league in interceptions over the middle third of the field. Stroud passed him up in that Chiefs game with 2 over the middle himself, but it's just something that there was certain throws in this offense that it felt like we just weren't getting to with Cousins. And even the willingness to be able to throw on first down, to go to the bootlegs, to just go to some of the things that Cousins either physically or just, he just couldn't make the throws, right? And it's been a struggle, I think. To me, this offense has looked a little bit handcuffed all year. This was a game with Penix in there, even though he's a rookie in his first start. It didn't look handcuffed. They didn't look afraid to call anything. He can throw over the middle. He can throw outside the numbers. There was a couple of terrific intermediate out routes he threw. And I going back and watching all the dropbacks, I don't think he made a single bad read or a mental mistake all day. And I know, look, he's playing the Giants. I get it. But I think he's got a pretty good matchup next week going into Washington. And I think he could make a lot of similar throws next week against that defense. So I think it was a really good day for Penix, even though the traditional numbers don't look so big, right? And people think about, he could have torn up the Giants. Well, he did what he needed to do to win. Obviously, the defense made a couple of big plays. But I thought Penix was fantastic in his first start.
Yeah, middle of the field is what I was going to point out, because there were a lot of things that I feel like he did well, but specifically the stark contrast of how he was able to drive the football over the intermediate middle. I know you talked about just kind of in between the numbers over the middle of the field. He was 8 for 8. He was 4 for 4 in the 10 to 19 yards down the field. So that intermediate middle, which I think is so important because it's exactly where those linebackers and those safeties could threaten, that you have to have arm talent to hit. And Michael Penix has serious arm talent to be able to hit those throws. Kirk doesn't anymore, or at least he certainly did not this year. It felt like anytime Kirk Cousins was attacking over the middle of the field, it had to be with such high anticipation. And if it was a second off, like you mentioned, he had 0 big-time throws and 8 turnover-worthy plays in that intermediate middle part of the field, 10 to 19 yards down the field, right in between the numbers and the hash mark. So it's an area where, to me, that was the biggest difference in a positive manner of why you put Michael Penix into the game. And we got to see that from game 1 from him, which is great to see. Falcons pass rush, for me, continues to be the story. It was the story of this game. How well they were able to play. 3 sacks, 14 pressures, 53.7% pass rush win percentage as a team. Weeks 1 through 8, so the first half of the season, this team had 7 total sacks. Just since week 9, and we're not even done with the entire second half of the year, they already have 20. They're going to finish with triple the sacks that they had through the first half of the season in the second half of the season. So, Caden Ellis, Arnold Ebiketie, like Matthew Judon, these guys all got sacks this past week. They're just playing very well. They're blitzing a little bit more, but to me, they're blitzing a little bit more with their linebackers than they have been the defensive backs. It felt like throughout the early parts of the season, whether it's from the slot or just corner blitzes in general, it felt like they were kind of trying to get a little bit creative with how they were blitzing their defensive backs, and it wasn't really working for them. Now when they blitz, they're doing it more from their box defenders, and I feel like it's just helping overwhelm the offensive line, and they're able to get home a lot more. So one of the most struggling and least intimidating pass rushes on paper, now all of a sudden becoming pretty dang good down the stretch. And with Tampa's loss and the Falcons winning, now the Falcons have that tie for first place in the division. And so with 2 games left to go, they're actually, I think, going in the right direction to be able to hold on to this thing. We'll see. The Bucs no longer control their own destiny, but the Falcons do. So it'll really come down to the wire, as it feels like it has in the NFC South for a little bit now. Who's your most impressive and most disappointing?
I'm glad you mentioned that pass rush and that increased blitzing, because honestly, if you look, their highest graded pass rusher and their leader in pressures is actually a linebacker they signed in the offseason. That's Caden Ellis. 5 pressures on just 11 pass rush reps, a strip sack, and also the pressure on Drew Lock that forced the Jesse Bates pick 6. He threw it before he wanted to. He didn't see Bates coming in the zone. And Caden Ellis, he's just somebody who took this game over as a pass rusher, as a blitzer. Also 3 positive run defense grades with a stop. Leads him this year with 37 pressures and an 86.3 pass rush grade, despite only having the 8th most reps blitzing on the team, or pass rushing, I should say, as a team. He's been, despite getting Matt Judon and having Grady Jarrett and all the young kids on the defensive line, it's actually a linebacker, and he played that hybrid role for the Saints too. They used him off the edge a little bit like we've seen before with Zach Baun, right, who's now playing great with Philly. Caden Ellis really had a huge impact on this game, 92.6 pass rush grade in this game. He was fantastic, and I think they're only going to increase that blitz usage more because of him.
I'll go to Bijan Robinson for my most impressive. 103 all-purpose yards, so rushing and receiving, because he's not returning kicks. Over 1,500 all-purpose yards this season. Only Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry have more. So Bijan Robinson, for him getting drafted in the top 10 and number 8 overall, and you go, do you take a running back that high? He could not be a better return on investment for them, right? For making the pick, if you want to compare him to necessarily maybe other players, okay, you can get into that discussion if you want to, but for picking Bijan Robinson, couldn't have gone better. He could not be better for what you envisioned him to be worth in that number 8 overall pick. He is affecting the game at a very high level, rushing and receiving. He could be a go-to offensive weapon at all times for this team. And so just a shout out to Bijan Robinson and how well he's been able to play another game where he had over 100 all-purpose yards. Most disappointing for me, it's the obvious one, but we've talked about so many things that are disappointing about this Giants team. So I feel like no matter what, we're kind of being repetitive here. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to the passing game. This team sucks at passing the football. It doesn't really matter who their quarterback has been, whether it's been Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito, they can't pass the football. I know it's been frustrating for a lot of their players, receivers. We've heard the frustrations from league neighbors throughout the season, but just from the coaches as well, and even guys who are struggling even at the quarterback position, knowing that they have to play better. But 22 for 39, we mentioned the 38 passing grade for Drew Lock there, just 210 passing yards in this game. And even with them starting the game out 7-0 with a passing touchdown to Tyrone Tracy in the back of the end zone, they could not sustain a passing attack that allowed them to stay competitive in this game. Atlanta scores 34 unanswered points after that, and the reason why is because they just don't have a consistent passing attack. So it's just still the most disappointing for me, because it's now there's now not even really an ability to evaluate a lot of players on this team, because the offensive output is as bad as it is and as inefficient as it is. So we're kind of we're on to next year, to modify the Bill Belichick quote. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with the New York Giants. And the only question that really remains is Joe Shane and is Brian Daboll going to still have their headset and their front office chairs and their front office when next season begins? So that's what I have as most disappointing. But what do you have?
I've got same thing. Pass protection, I know we've talked about it a lot, but Evan Neal at right tackle, another rough day for him. And only 2 pressures officially given up, but he had 7 other losses as a pass protector, 37.7 pass blocking grade. And watching the reps, honestly, and watching him kind of struggle to readjust his feet both to the speed rush and back to the inside move, I think the only thought that I have left with Neal 3 years into it, I think you kind of pull the Mekhi Becton here and maybe see if he can play guard next year. Just be like, okay, if we have one more year and we're going to give him another shot, I think you move him inside, you give him a whole offseason inside and see if he can play in there. I don't think he has the feet to play tackle at this level. It's just too hard for him with the athletes that there are out on the edge. And look, these aren't even the best edge rushers in the league you're going to face when you're playing the Atlanta Falcons. But I mentioned even Caden Ellis and the Falcons were even attacking him on stunts and things like that. It's just, I think Evan Neal, either, I don't know if his time is coming to an end in New York, but if it's not, or even if he goes to another team like Mekhi Becton did, I think you have to give him a shot at guard. I just don't know that he can play enough in space, play well enough, I should say, in space to stay at tackle.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you become one today.